Settle down, brother. This is the Quarter Report powered by ENCA.com. South Africa is a movie. Welcome to the watch party. A raft of really famous South African influencers are in big trouble because they all promoted a program targeting 18 to 22-year-old South African women, encouraging them to go and work in Russia in a really dodgy program that is being investigated by international law enforcement. It seems as though young women are led across there on false pretenses, sometimes can't even, according to some allegations, they aren't even allowed to travel home, and they are put into all different kinds of work programs that they were not offered in the first place, including things like drone factories. Now, a drone factory in Russia right now is more than likely a drone factory that exists to serve the Russian military to create military-grade weapons or at least equipment. And these influencers are really famous. One of them is Cyan Boujee, someone I had to teach Eric about today. There is a massive and ever-present danger of scams on the internet that dupe lots of people, that destroy their lives, take their money, and put them in very dangerous situations. And more and more and more, influencers are unwittingly accepting money to advance scams, give them legitimacy, and make those scammers seem trustworthy. And so today we're going to talk about Cyan Boujee and all of the other South African influencers who participated in this extraordinary situation that they have all retracted or deleted their posts. And we're going to talk about the way that influencers are unwittingly aiding and abetting scammers and putting their audiences and supporters in danger. This is the Quarter Report powered by ENCA.com. As I said, the only place that you can watch the entire show, including the WhatsApp line and all of our different stories, is at the link in the description. If you're watching on YouTube, it's enca.com, that link. The other link is to www.3beaniesnetwork.com, where you can go and buy some of our merch. This story has gone global. Like, as somebody tweeted yesterday, BBC News' coverage of this was not BBC News Africa. It was BBC News. You will see the headline, South African women warned about viral Russian job videos. So Cyan Boujee is one of the most famous, if not the most famous, of these influencers who are involved. I tried to explain to Eric earlier who Cyan Boujee was. She's very famous. She does like celebrity influence. Why are you laughing at me? She does celebrity influencer stuff. She's one of those people who is famous for being good at being famous. You know, like that's the skill.
Okay.
Like all famous people, she now also apparently DJs.
Right.
But mainly she flies around the world. She has a photo of her with Jacob Zuma. Her surname is also Zuma. I don't know whether they are related. Frankly, it's not been that important to me.
I appreciate you recapping all these details for both myself and the recorders, because I will say I forgot everything you told me earlier in the day.
Okay. She's got nearly 1 million followers on Instagram. She's got like over 1.5 million followers on TikTok. She's really famous and she's really, really, really big. So she's the most famous of a raft of influencers who made videos promoting these opportunities for these 18 to 22-year-old women in her audience, but we'll take that as South Africans, that they would be given jobs in Russia in an area called Tatarstan, related to tartar sauce. Eric asked me earlier, as I said, I think there's an R in tartar sauce, but there's Tatar sauce in the Tatarstan in the Tatarstan.
Nice, Dan.
What?
You just took my line about the R in the middle of Tatar sauce and twisted it.
I was recounting. Silence me, Eric. So someone will explain where the Tatar sauce comes from Tatarstan in a while. I'm absolutely sure. But it seems like there's a special economic zone there. And actually, it's not. It's in Russia. And Cyan Boujee, amongst others, were talking about how there were these opportunities to go across, learn Russian, get training, and get a career in a variety of like different industries and sectors. In fact, Cyan Boujee said the program is, quote, a fresh new start, and adding that apparently not a good word for an influencer to say who's telling you about an opportunity to change your life by moving to another country where you don't speak the language on another continent halfway across the world. The word apparently, not good. If you hear the word apparently, that person does not really know what they're talking about, I think it's fair to say. But she says, apparently girls are treated fairly here, Africans, Asians, and Latin Americans. Because yes, Cyan's video was shot in Tatarstan. Again, definitely not how the Russians pronounce it, but I'm doing my best because there's no R in it. And that immediately got huge uproar because Interpol, amongst others, and if you don't know, Interpol is the big, like, multi-country participating kind of like crime investigation service in Europe. Interpol is investigating the company and the special economic zone in Tatarstan for allegedly bringing in young women, particularly from Africa, who don't know better because they were misled in the advertising, and forcing them into work programs in industries like drone creation that they did not sign up for. And even there are allegations about whether or not those women are allowed to return home or they are prevented from returning home. And it has led to some absolutely jaw-dropping, scripted promotional content. In fact, as dear friend of the show, Zetu Paula, is about to describe in a TikTok that she did, which we just think is so great that we're going to show you how she covered it. One influencer went to Tatarstan and interviewed a young woman who was clearly in the program. And one of the questions that she had been given to ask this person was, are you allowed to go home? And the woman says, yes, we are. But kind of with like drained eyes, no soul behind them, no spirit in it, cut weirdly short. And then there was a follow-up question about if the woman had ever gone home. And she had to think twice about it. And then she said, yeah, I went home for, it's so weird. And as Zetu points out, like if one of the scripted lines is, can you go home? There's a problem. And there's probably fire with the smoke of those allegations. So here's how Zetu covered this. I think it nails this part of the story.
Your favorite influencers are recruiting you to build drones in Russian factories and also possibly to be trafficked. This is literally an article from Bloomberg talking about how Alabunga, whatever it is, that Russian company that's looking for women aged 18 to 22, they are being probed. A simple Google search is going to show you the nonsense going on with this company. And they're targeting African women specifically. When you Google this thing, referred to as the Alabuga Start program, a recruitment program for foreign women to work in Russian weapons factories. There are also some South African influencers that were flown to Russia to interview some of the people working in hospitality. I came across one of these videos.
There's a rumor that apparently anyone who enters the Start program can't go back home. Is that true?
No, that's not true. You can go back home.
Since you've been here for 3 years, have you been able to go back home?
I was home for another reason. I was home last year. Yes.
Oh, so you do go home?
Yes,
It was the, oh, so you do go home for me. Like the third line, like the previous two questions were like, yeah, I can go home. Oh, so you do go home.
Yeah.
Like it's not even
Doubling
good.
down.
It's not even good acting. Okay, so since then, a lot of influencers have taken down their videos. Since then, a handful of influencers have even released apology videos. Cyan Boujee, for her part, posted a 10-post carousel reel on Instagram where she was essentially receiving fancy drinks, sleeping, and hanging out in what looks like an unbelievably luxury private jet bedroom. The caption says, legs stretched, champagne poured, drama ignored, full stop. Which for me is not the right tone for, oh, oops, I just promoted a potential human trafficking or at least exploitation of African women, taking them to Russia under false pretenses that's been investigated by Interpol kind of energy. She also posted an Instagram story where she took quite a famous now meme picture of Lindiwe Sisulu sitting at a laptop looking upset. Which I guess was to say you're annoyed with the way that people have responded to your posts online. And I am just stunned by the level of flippant, dismissive, arrogance, disrespect, and like, oh, you guys are really giving me problems for this? Like, this is just like so inconvenient or annoying for me. What a hassle. When you were clearly a part of this thing that you should absolutely not have been a part of. And this links into more and more and more scams that people are falling for online, not because they're not internet literate, not because they're clicking on pop-ups saying that they want an iPhone while illegally streaming a series, not because they've seen a single in their area on another pop-up that they think is a real person, not because they've got emails that look like they're from a bank that they're not, but because they have formed meaningful parasocial relationships and you trust them and believe in them and their goodness and you want them in your life. So these are scams where scammers take advantage of that. And arguably the influencers, although they pay the influencers very well, but they also to a degree, I believe, scam the influencers into not doing their due diligence and not checking properly. Although maybe some of these influencers knew that this was a sus situation. And sometimes influencers do know that they're probably a part of a scam. But they take advantage of the parasocial relationship, of the relationship that's been built between a creator and their audience and the trust that has been built to then sell product. And this is really, really insidious and scary because Cyan Boujee with millions of followers, many of these other influencers with tens, hundreds of thousands, and in some cases millions of followers, have built this trust relationship. And so when they say this is good, this is legit, even if they don't say the word apparently, their audience members will go, wow. It's like being friends with someone who says that they went to a good university or had a good time in a shop or like enjoy working somewhere. You trust them. Why would they Why would they dupe you? Why would they not tell the truth, even though you know that these people are being paid to push forward these partnerships? It's normalized because the way that they treat their social media is almost like you're meeting them and hanging out with them and believing what they say about their own lives. And that's how people get taken advantage of, and their trust gets so exploited, sometimes with consequences this dangerous.
Yeah, I want to add, guys, just be careful, man. Like, it's the internet. We all know that, like, most of what you put on your Instagram is a version of yourself, right? It's not necessarily your whole self. It's what you want people to see. Influencers are no different. I think it's wild to think about how much this kind of behavior when it comes to basically scamming people has changed with the advent of social media and platforms like Instagram and TikTok and all these things. Back in the day, you would just meet someone who would wine and dine you, and then later on they'd try and get you to traffic drugs, right? Like, I mean, I know some people in my life where that happened, right? Then this is obviously a time when, like, WhatsApp wasn't really around. It was a long time ago, but maybe even BBC. But but I had to throw it in there. Sorry. But it was, right. It was all about trust, and I think that's really what's so important here is the fact that you should probably reevaluate whether you trust someone just because they're on the internet. It's like we say here on the show here as well, right? We do want people to question us at times. Well, always if you disagree with us, right? Because everything and everyone is fallible to some extent.
Totally. And we're trying to be perfect, but no one is. And so the feedback is useful.
Of course, 100%. And so you should always be questioning whether something is legitimate and real. And sometimes if something is too good to sound true, it probably is.
Yeah. So now, just like the Sol Pinduka episode on Friday, when I talked about radio and how radio works, like in relation to the Sol Pinduka situation, because I worked in radio for a decade, I'm going to talk about influencers because I'm an online creator with a huge following. And so I also get approaches to do deals, because now the question is, did these influencers behave irresponsibly, or did they act with a degree of like enough reasonable diligence to go, okay, they also kind of got scammed? And this is where it becomes complicated. So every single person, every single creator who accepts paid partnerships has, I would hope, certain kinds of things that they don't do, or certain kinds of things that they would find inappropriate. And it can even get into extremes, right? Because some influencers might say, no, I do anything that anybody pays my rate. Okay, if someone came up and asked you to like hawk illegal drugs, would you? No, you obviously wouldn't. So everybody has got certain standards that by which they judge what kind of campaigns they're going to do. And that requires you, and everyone has a certain responsibility because of the trust that you've built with your audience and the way that they believe you and rely on you when you push a product for them, right? And so everyone, therefore, has a responsibility by their audience to do serious due diligence and to think carefully about the effect that their work has on, and their promotion of certain products has on their audience, whether it puts them at risk or scams them or exploits them, or even whether it just delivers a product that is substandard relative to the cost of the product or the promise of the product. All influencers and creators have to do this. Now, before influencers and creators, advertising would happen on TV, newspaper, radio. Those stations, those traditional legacy media, have fastidious rules, guidelines, checks, and vetting before putting anything on air. In fact, there are laws that you have to fulfill before you put certain kinds of things on air, certain checks that you have to do. But ever since social media came along, there's now direct advertising that can happen between, remember, an influencer, a creator, is just a normal person who built an extraordinary following for whatever they did. They're not radio stations, they're not TV stations, they're not held to the same standards by the law strictly, and they don't have the experience that those mass communication broadcasters have. And so things can get weird very quickly. People can get approached and offered a lot of money to just for them something harmless, like going online and promoting something, and they never have to think about it again. You see waves of advertising that happen for this, like energy drinks, like vaping, all of these kinds of products, like lifestyle products, but sometimes they're very serious. Like, hey, here's an opportunity to uproot your life, move to another continent, another hemisphere. But the dream is so sweet, right? The payoff is you can get a whole career, you can get training, education, language instruction in Russian, and then a whole new career if you go and do this. Now, that is the scale of a promise of like a university, right? Like moving countries to go to a university or college or accept a huge job in a big company. And any reasonable legacy media broadcaster, mass communicator, would then do fastidious checks before going and allowing that advertising to happen. But when it's individual influencers, why there are no norms and standards for them or even checks that they have to hold themselves to. It's just their own good sense and experience. What seems to have happened was this special economic zone in Tajikistan or 11, this Abaluga, Beluga, Labubu, Babuga, whatever, Abaluga, special economic zone was they created material involving influencers to send to the influencers. So they were almost going to the influencers, hey, other influencers have done this kind of advertising, so you should feel fine because they thought it was fine. But you don't even know if those influencers really thought it was fine, or if those influencers were even real influencers. They could have been paid actors performing being normal influencers to convince real influencers with massive audience to actually do this work. Or they could have been duped by paid actors further down the value chain. This could have been a slow work of you get an influencer with very few followers to do it because they will accept the money and they got very few followers, so it's small consequence. And then you use their videos to convince slightly bigger influencers, and then you use their videos to convince slightly bigger influencers, all the way up to Cyan Boujee, 1.7 million followers on TikTok. So I can empathize with influencers being duped. But on the other hand, as in Zetu's video, one Google, and the top 6 news stories are investigations. The top news stories are investigations into how this is dodgy. In fact, one of the top stories is not even from this year, it's from last year, talking about how shady and dodgy this is and how it's under serious investigation, how it targets African women, that Bloomberg piece that Zetu talked about and read from. That is so unbelievably first port of call. You have to make sure that the brand is not going to abuse and exploit the audience whose support gives you your life, your success, and your achievements, and your access to money. And if you are so negligent and you are so inattentive that you just have to do a new brand deal, you're not even checking properly, you're not even being diligent or focused, you're not even making sure that this brand is not going to abuse and take advantage of and exploit your audience, you don't deserve that audience. And you probably aren't built for this career.